So this is a bit of a different video for me. I'm releasing an episode of one of my documentaries on this channel, so you can see some of my other work, and also the others are available. Other episodes of this series are available on Amazon Prime. So it's my friend Juliet, and she had the most interesting life story. Not only was her great-grandfather the inventor of Bovril, she lived in a massive mansion in a place called Melchbourne Park, and she grew up in Chelsea as a child and went to private school, and then ended up in like a St Trinian style boarding school, which we go into. She was later signed to EMI as a musician, and her original album from then is being re-released in a few weeks' time. So let's not take any more of your time, and here is the first episode of All These Days.
We're here today because I wanted to visit the church and the village where I grew up, Melchbourne, in the middle of Bedfordshire. It's where I spent many happy years with my two sisters. My parents are buried here, as is my Aunt Pearl, and they were the inspiration for my song All These Days Are Gone. I was sitting at the piano a couple of years ago now, and there was a photograph of my parents on their engagement day, way back in 1947, I think it was, 46. And I just looked at them in this sort of rather faded photograph, and I thought, I think I want to write a song about them. And it really was as simple as that, and the song came quite quickly, as I think all the best songs do.
Three of them living down the old dirt road at the back of the very last century. Three the likes we won't see again, part of recent history. Two are married for 50 years, the other one never got wed.
Mum was absolutely wonderful. She was born in New York, and she came over at the age of 3 months. She came over on the Lusitania with her parents and her brother and her two sisters and two nurses who were to look after the babbies. And the Lusitania, which most people know, was torpedoed on the, what was it? The
7th of May.
7th of May 1915 by the Germans. And Mum survived, along with her parents and her nurse who saved her, and her elder brother Stuart. Sadly, two of the sisters went down with the ship, as did the Swedish nurse who was looking after the other two. And Mum always said, didn't she? She said, I was put on this earth for some reason. She was put on this earth for some reason. It was always the pointy of the finger. And she was brilliant, Mum.
Sort of thing I love most about Mum is her sense of humour, and to a certain extent I think I have inherited it.
She found humour in everything. Yeah. I never heard her say a cross word. She never badmouthed anyone. She was fairly hands-off, I think we can say, when we were children. Yes. Didn't have a lot to do with us. No cook.
No.
I remember she once...
She couldn't cook.
My God. She once cooked something. We all sat there and said, really rather revolting, isn't it?
I know.
And we all had to agree that it was rather revolting.
I still laugh when people talk about, it tastes just like my mother's cooking.
Yes.
Please, no.
Please, God, no.
Mum used to play the piano for me to prance around and do my ballet. She encouraged us to play the piano. We had wonderful parties. Mum was always organising wonderful parties for us.
She was a brilliant woman, and she was very no nonsense. Yeah. If we felt ill, it was like, get on with it.
Yeah, never mind.
You know, what's wrong with you today? You've got mumps, I'll get on with it.
Yeah.
I always remember Mum and Dad sitting at their desks in Chelsea Square. Dad was always at his desk, more or less up until just before he died, I suppose. Yeah. Always working on his accounts. He was fastidious about bookkeeping and used to make us keep cash books when we had pocket money, and of course we were always way out.
Oh yeah, threepence. He gave up quite quickly.
He gave up quite quickly on the cash books, but he was fastidious. He noted everything about his illnesses, his life. I mean, the endless records that we have.
Dad was a gentleman in every sense of the word. He was a gentleman, and he was a gentleman. Sort of slightly deaf, or ignored us, or ignored sort of what Mum would say. Something.
I think deaf later years. Yeah. He was distant. He was Victorian, but not in any sort of unpleasant way.
No.
He just had a set of values, I suppose.
He was very keen on his hunting, and I think possibly a bit disappointed that none of us
hated it
really
so
followed
much.
in his footsteps. But I
and very religious.
Oh gosh, we were a
Serious.
reader.
Yeah.
But he did say he never wanted to actually fully take the cloth, as he might have said, because he didn't want to have to move the family around. I remember going to church once. It was the snow was really deep. I don't know what year it was. The days we had snow, and I was on the toboggan. Dad was pulling me on the toboggan to church, and I said, "But I've got my trousers on. I can't go to church in my trousers." And Dad said, "God doesn't mind what you wear to church. It's the fact that you turn up that he likes." And that was more Dad's sort of thing.
They were almost as different as chalk and cheese.
I think Mum's Americanness, because she was American, I think was very significant. Actually, she wasn't an English country lady, was she?
Absolutely not.
Although she married an English country gentleman.
They travelled a lot, travelled extensively.
And then complained.
And then complained they were a bit tired.
Yeah.
They had a wonderful life together, I think.
3 of them living in a big old house with the mice and the cold and the damp. The weekly trip they'd share, the wheel, the superstore or the bank, with the dogs that stiffened through the years and still refuse to die.
My memories of living there are really very complex. First of all, I can't believe it, because so much has changed in my life. I look at it with great joy, actually, because I think they were happy days. They were.
Melchbourne was a settlement by 1086 and is mentioned in the Domesday Book. At the time of the Reformation, Melchbourne went to the Russell family, the Earls of Bedford, who were based at Woburn. At the same time, at a place called Bletsoe Castle, which is very close to here, lived the St. John family, St. John, and they were connected to the royal family. It is difficult to imagine, but this area was very much favoured by James I for hunting. The then Lord St. John of Bletsoe entertained the king, and he hadn't got a large enough house to look after all the retinue of the king's household. And so he bought Melchbourne, and he built the present house in the period immediately after 1608. The last St. John left in 1939, and then the house was taken over by the GIs and the American troops, and then in 1953 the Lawson Johnsons come to Melchbourne.
The St. John family married the Lawson Johnson family, who were the Bovril family. My great-grandfather had invented Bovril. My father inherited the house in, I think, the 1930s. He didn't have the wherewithal to do it up. And it was only in 1953 that my father decided to renovate, and the family moved in at that point. When we first moved in, we all lived at the top in, I think it was the flat at the top there, the very top. And we lived there for 3 years while all the refurbishment work was going on, which seemed to go on forever. So the rest of the house was really out of bounds. Then we moved down to that wing there, over there on the right, and we lived there. And then one by one, different people came to live in various flats. My Aunt Pearl lived up there. We had a Mrs. Hansford and her daughters who lived up there. And then my sister had a flat latterly up there. So there were people dotted about, probably 4 flats at one point, and Mrs. Campion, who lived on the top floor.
We had a massive bedroom and a large playroom, and we had a massive dining room. I mean, the whole rooms, 2 of the rooms here would have, formed one room there.
The dining room was very much for special occasions. It was beautiful, it was panelled, very dark, I seem to remember. And it really was Christmas, birthdays, the odd function, anniversaries. We didn't really eat there very often. We tended to eat in the kitchen.
We would walk round the roof sometimes.
Oh my God, we weren't allowed. Dad was
looking back at it, terribly dangerous.
Might be dangerous because it was all a bit sort of slippy and slidey. But there again, it was all creaky and lovely and dusty, and I could still smell it. I had a darkroom up there, and you had your atelier up there, didn't you?
I used to paint up there.
Yeah, you did.
I used to paint.
And it had, when we first went there, before they did the room up, they had these wonderful chalk drawings from the troops in the war.
Yes,
it's wonderful.
GIs.
And apparently those, if we kept those, they're worth a fortune
of
nowadays.
course.
Wonderful Disney characters, Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse. And they were done in chalk on the woodwork.
Yeah,
of
we
the
loved
long
them,
room.
didn't we?
They were amazing. And then, of course, it was all painted over.
Well, the GIs were here during the Second World War, stationed here, and they lingered quite long after. So we moved in 53, and there was still, although they weren't here in the house, there were, up in the woods, there were Nissen huts, some of which are still there, actually. And there was a sentry who stood in a sentry box by one of the driveways, and we used to do a sort of faux salute. It was all just dwindling by then, but we thought it was rather exciting. Yeah, there were people in uniform, and that was the early 50s.
There were times when we would be told that we weren't allowed to go out of the house because they were carrying out controlled explosion. We used to have to check in to come down to the house, which was quite interesting.
But we thought it was rather exciting.
We thought it was wonderful.
Yes,
and all the concrete roads were built by the American RAF, and hence later we learnt to drive on them.
Yeah.
All these days are gone. All these days are gone. They spoke of when they met the Queen in 1955. The world was at a tipping point, but the three of them survived. And now they draw their pensions, so glad to be alive.
In the films that I have found, which is really what led to this documentary, there's lots of me and my sisters frolicking around here, around that lawn over there where we used to run races. As I got older, I used to make little short films. I think I must have seen a couple of French movies and thought, hey, I want to make films.
Margie was sort of my muse. When I obviously took it into my head or my hands to use the movie camera, and I obviously thought I was David Lean, didn't I?
Definitely,
or David
Bailey. I think because actually that some of the shots that we've seen, there's a lot of trees doing that, and that's very Dr. Zhivago.
Yeah, lots of sun floating through trees. And the wonderful thing is, we haven't seen them for 50 years or something.
Oh, more than that.
Until they've been
50
literally
years, 60 years,
sitting in a carrier bag.
Not 60, 55. Now there's me and my paper dress, which was sent to me from my cousin in Arizona, as were those rather strange glasses, and that beautiful cherry blossom.
Yeah,
absolutely. I can smell it now. We used to go and sit under that. There was a weeping cherry tree, and you could just sit underneath it. And when the blossom was out, you could hide in it and look through
and it
at the blue sky.
Somehow.
Oh, it smelled wonderful cherry blossom.
It was wonderful. You were a stylish thing. You were, and dare I say, you wanted to be an actor.
I did want to be an actor.
And
I wanted to be in the theatre.
And you were a dancer for a time, weren't you?
I briefly did go to the London School of Contemporary Dance. It didn't last, there we go. I wasn't awfully good.
You did it.
But there we go.
So what happened to your paper dress? It
sort of fell apart. In the end.
It was very...
I think you only wore them once.
You only wore them once.
Or twice. It was very 60s, and I did. That's very...
And
this, of course, is part of the garden that Dad created.
Yes.
This wonderful sort of all the trees and the...
Well, he didn't plant the trees.
No, he didn't plant the trees, but he did create this garden.
Yeah. Accepting it's a brave new world with the new technologies. Watching soaps go round and round, they do their tapestry. While the wars they come and the wars they go, it's all on live TV.
Growing up at the mansion, as Dad liked to call it, was actually fantastic because we were just given a free rein.
Yeah.
We were just allowed to do what we want. No one ever questioned.
Well, where we are now is where we used to ride our bikes at high speed, competitions, races. We used to love it, see who'd go the fastest and probably fall off and scrape our knees. But Yep, this is it. It's a bit overgrown now. Lots of leaves flying around. It was very isolated, and me and my two sisters, we had our ponies. We'd ride our ponies, we'd talk to our ponies. I don't remember really seeing friends. Occasionally it would be arranged that friends would come and stay.
It was just such a treat. And the three of us, the three other quads, used to sort of take in turns to be invited. It was just a weekend. We went down Friday night, came back Sunday night, and we had a great time riding. I remember thinking that Melchbourne Park was like a ranch because it had acres and acres of concrete sort of paths where you used to be able to ride for miles through the woods, and it wasn't like a normal English country house at all.
We twice went to the Grand National, because we used to go to Newmarket and Toaster races, but twice we went to the Grand National. And the first year, as you say, Ayala won, Mr. Teasy, and I had.
Why do I remember that?
I remember it very well, and I had appendicitis.
Yeah.
And then the second time we went was when Foynarven won.
Yeah.
With John Buckingham on board.
And we were actually, I was filming it, which just seems extraordinary looking back. Why was I filming it? I mean, it was Dad's camera.
Was it Dad's camera?
But it wasn't mine.
Well, I think he bought it for us to use.
I suppose he did.
Yeah, I mean, Dad never used it.
But
he bought it for the three of us to use.
Yeah, well, we did.
Yeah, we did. But it was brilliant, and we were very, very lucky to have gone.
And I remember Dad would put a bet on for me, and I remember sort of age whatever I was then.
1 shilling and 6pence.
Thinking how exciting it was.
I remember the first. I remember putting my money on Merriman II, and I put a shilling on. I got something like £1.13 and 6 back. I mean, that was just so much money.
Yeah, absolutely.
So exciting.
All these days are gone. All these days are gone. All these days, all these days, all these days are gone. All these days, all these days, all these days are gone, gone, gone.
I'm just remembering, because we grew up in a big house, it seems so alien to me now. It's just so far away and gone. And we didn't really play with people in the village. But years later, I met a lady who'd grown up in this village, and she said to me, "Oh, it's so nice to meet you." And I said, "Yeah, you too." We remembered each other. We're probably the same age. And she said, "You're so normal." And I said, "What do you mean normal?" And she said, "Well, we thought you were royalty." And that absolutely horrified me, because we didn't see ourselves as royalty, but that's how other people perceived us, because we live in a big house. It is fairly staggering, actually, to be here, because I haven't been here for probably 20, 25 years. The house was sold by my father in 1982, so I lived here from 53 till I think about 1979 I moved away. And it is very strange, because a lot of it looks the same from the outside. It is the same, which is actually rather reassuring. Of course, inside it's totally different. It's now 10 flats, beautiful flats, absolutely beautiful, but unrecognisable, because of course extra stairways and kitchens that weren't there before, and garages used for flats. And I remember the view and the environment as much as I remember the house, just the freedom somehow, and of living in an enormous house. I thought it was normal to live in an enormous house. It never really occurred to me till I left home and discovered the real world that we'd had a very unusual childhood. We were incredibly lucky. Today, emotionally, I feel melancholic, because the memories are very rich and they come fast and furious. I often think about what they would think about the song. I can't help but think they would like it. I think it's also a universal song. I mean, for anybody who's, when you're moving on, you're getting older in life, and you look back on what is no longer there. It's a universal sentiment. I think they would get that. I like to think a lot of people get that. So it isn't just about them, it's about each generation that passes and looking back. Many people have said to me that the song draws parallels in their life. I've had people who burst into tears when they hear it. You could say it's a bit of a tearjerker because so many people resonate with it. Whatever their experiences, whatever their background, whatever they're growing up, everybody has that experience of times past. I wanted to capture that.
All these days are gone. All these days are gone. All these days, all these days, all these days are gone. All these days, all these days, all these days.